Happy Halloween, everyone. It's that time of year for all things scary, and so I thought this would be a good opportunity to review an old and scary title from the annals of the back issue bin. So before you get too far into my video, Malevolent Rising, my comic book, issue number 5. If you really want a scary read, is currently for sale at my Indiegogo, in demand, as well as all of the first 4 issues and number 5. So I'll put a link in the description if you could check that out. I would appreciate it. Now on with the video. So I recently read that Spider-Man is the #1 purchased Halloween costume in the world, which kind of makes sense. Thinking about it, trick-or-treaters come to my door, I would say every third one probably is Spider-Man. But that got me to thinking of a good, scary Spider-Man story, and that is Torment by Todd McFarlane. Now, Torment is one of my favorite Spider-Man stories, and I think this story either has gotten a bad rap in some people's minds or has kind of fallen out of memory because it has been a while. The story is from the 90s. But I think it's a fantastic story, and we'll get into why, but let's go ahead and talk about it. So Torment is really known, I think now, probably more than anything, just for this cover. This is one of the more famous Spider-Man covers. I think this cover's been ripped off by dozens of artists over the years since it came out. But it was first associated with this story. Now, Torment starts kind of like any normal Spider-Man story. He's going around doing the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man thing when the city is brought to its knees in fear by a series of brutal murders. And as Spider-Man looks into it, he finds clues that lead him to his old enemy, the Lizard. But this doesn't fit the Lizard's normal MO. The Lizard is usually kind of a mad scientist gone wrong, turn all of humanity into reptiles kind of a villain. And he seems to be in some kind of a frenzied mode where he's just slaughtering people and leaving bodies in the streets. So Spider-Man doesn't quite know how right he is, but when he encounters his old foe, he doesn't encounter something he recognizes. The Lizard, who's normally very chatty, is quiet and snarling and stoic. He seems to kill indiscriminately, and he's impervious to harm. There's nothing Spider-Man can do to bring him down. He's much stronger, much faster, and much tougher than he's normally used to. On top of that, Spider-Man's spider sense, which is normally one of his greatest assets and the thing that keeps him out of harm's way, is throbbing uncontrollably. And in between each throb, he's getting horrible visions of blood and dark magic and other things that are clouding his mind and distracting him during battle. So in those visions, he starts getting glimpses of his old enemy, Kraven the Hunter. And at the time of the publishing of Torment, it had been about 2, maybe 3 years since the Thunder storyline, which was Kraven's last hunt. And that was where Kraven thought he had killed Spider-Man. Ultimately, at the end of the story, kills himself. And that comes into play later on in this tale. So this story leaves Spider-Man exhausted, beaten, bruised, and with a constant throbbing, buzzing migraine in his head that will not let go. He is down to the depths that he can get to, and all of a sudden he starts hallucinating. He starts seeing visions of his old enemy, Kraven the Hunter, welcoming him to the afterlife. All of this is finally revealed to be the work of a voodoo priestess named Calypso, who has ties in her past to Kraven the Hunter, and who's come after Spider-Man for revenge. And she doesn't just want Spider-Man to die, she wants Spider-Man to suffer. So she's taken the Lizard and putting him into her thrall, and has put a spell onto Spider-Man, which has put this spider sense, this constant pounding of a spider sense in his head to keep him off balance and make him easier and easier to manipulate. So Spider-Man has been put on this collision course with the Lizard, who is completely under Calypso's control, and he has no ability to stop him, nor does he have ability to shut down the spider sense. And this all culminates into a final battle, which sees Spider-Man pretty much pushed to his limits and then far beyond them in order to overcome Calypso. What a fantastic story Torment was. It's everything that I like about a comic. It hits so many of the tropes that I enjoy in a story. First of all, look at the artwork. I have always thought that Torment is Todd McFarlane at the top of his game. This was, even beyond any of his Spawn stuff, I think Torment is his best artwork to date. The first probably 6 issues of Spawn are gorgeous, but this artwork, in my opinion, really you have trouble topping it. And one of the things that I really like about this story, and stories like it, is it takes a character like Spider-Man, who's normally a pretty 4-color, hero, sometime Avenger, always, fighting in the light of day against brightly colored characters, and puts him in a completely different element. We've taken Spider-Man out of one of his normal stories, and we have put him straight into a horror movie. And it has everything you want from a horror movie. It has blood, it has mystery, it's dark, it's dank. He's crawling through alleys, he's crawling around Gothic cathedrals and in old burned out houses. It's such a cool story. It takes Spider-Man out of his element, which I really like. It also takes one of his greatest powers, his spider sense, and turns it against him, which is another trope in comic book storytelling that I like, is when you can take something that's normally a hero's strength and you make it their weakness. So Calypso and the Lizard are formidable villains. And one of the neat things the two of them do as a duo is, while you have something very familiar with the Lizard, he's been taken and put into a different light as this kind of savage creature. He's basically a voodoo zombie, and Calypso is just an unnerving presence. You never really get a good idea of what her background is. She talks about it a little bit when she goes into her motivations or what you know of them. But even by the end of the story, after Spider-Man's overcome this, you don't quite know why any of this is happening. In fact, one of the more powerful panels in the story is he finally gets to Calypso, and as he's trying to defeat her, he just is repeatedly shouting at her, why is this happening? He never really learns, and that's great. As the reader, we get a glimpse into why it's happening, but Spider-Man doesn't. She really does a good job of getting into Peter Parker's head and really getting him to the limit of what he can endure and then past it. You really see Spider-Man put to the ultimate test of his abilities and what it is that he can actually overcome. And in the process of doing it, it's done in a very well-paced storyline, 5 issues. It's scary, it's dark, and it gets increasingly darker, starting out as I said at the beginning of the video, your kind of standard Spider-Man story, and then it just gets darker and darker and more into the twisted and the unnatural and the supernatural, which is very cool. Now, Torment is also known for this cover gimmick. It's one of the best-selling comic books of all time. So one of the reasons they did it is there were all these covers. There's the standard cover, the copper cover, the silver cover, the gold cover, the platinum cover, which was, I think, one in every 1,500 and goes for tons of money. But, yeah, and you know what? When I was a young comic book collector, I got all the covers. I never had a platinum, though. I never did get that one. I did have the copper, silver, and I always called the standard one the green cover, my friends and I, because that's kind of what the color we saw was. But if you look back at the gimmicks and you look past all of the guff that it kind of gets these days for being just a dark 90s story, I think it really tells a very good, complex, and kind of fish out of water tale with Spider-Man. You really get to see him in a light that you don't normally get to see, and you really get to see him taking on something that he normally doesn't fight and really, honestly, doesn't really understand. Spider-Man's head is more in science. All of this magic and voodoo and all this other stuff that is thrown into the story is not in Spider-Man's wheelhouse. So he is really out of his element, and it shows. And both through the artwork and through the storytelling, you just see Spider-Man pushed as far as you can push a character, and then you just see what's left of him that comes out the other side. I mean, by the end of the story, he just looks like he went through a meat grinder, and it's fantastic. So I can't give this a high enough recommendation, especially in today's environment where comics are letting us down so much. I always like to tell people you could probably go every week to a comic book store, go through the back issues, and find 5 or 6 comic books that you've never read that you would love. And you can do that every week for the rest of your life, because there's just this vast library of comics. And there's a reason comic books used to be great. And there's a reason that us older fans kind of complain about the newer stuff, where more and more fewer and fewer books kind of live up to these standards that we were used to when we first came into the hobby. So, did you read Torment? If you did, what did you think about it? Let's talk about that in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this story? Do you remember it fondly, or do you kind of just remember this as just a weird, nostalgic trip through the 90s? What did you think of Spider-Man, or Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man overall? He did continue to write the series for, I think, 8 issues on this one, with maybe 1 or 2 fill-ins. I personally like this run. I'd like to know what you guys think. So let's talk about that in the comments below. And while you're down there, please hit like and subscribe. I'd love to have you as a subscriber to the channel. Help us grow and help me produce a bit more content for you guys. And I will be back next week with some more comics news and reviews. And thanks so much for hanging on this one. Talk to you later.